Bert Salonga had carried crates for the Vidal trading house for 18 years, and in all that time he had never once seen Mateo Vidal go still in the middle of the market floor. Vendors fell silent when the boss walked the rows. That was simply how Anselmo Market worked, the way weather worked, but the boss himself never stopped, never paused, never gave anyone the chance to wonder what was on his mind. On a gray Tuesday morning in October, Mateo Vidal stopped walking. He did not move again for the better part of a minute, and Bert, 3 stalls down with a crate of green mangoes balanced on his shoulder, watched the whole market seem to hold its breath with him. It was not like Mateo to walk the rows at all. Other men in his position sent foremen, sent ledgers, sent word. Mateo Vidal came himself every morning since the week he buried his father 2 years before. Because a man who only hears what others choose to tell him, his father used to say, ends up knowing nothing true. So he walked. Vendors who owed him money straightened their spines when he passed. Vendors who didn't owe him their stalls in the first place and straightened anyway. No one in Anselmo Market crossed Mateo Vidal, not because he had ever raised a hand to a soul, but because everyone understood, without being told twice, what it cost to lose his trust. He had stopped now in front of a stall he did not recognize. A woman selling boiled corn and rice cakes wrapped in banana leaf, a hand-lettered sign, a small boy crouched behind the counter, stacking corn into a pyramid with the serious concentration of a much older man. The boy looked up at a customer, smiled with his whole face, and said, in a voice too solemn for someone so small, "Best in the market." My mama grew it herself. It was the smile. Mateo had seen that exact smile only once before, in a mirror, the morning his father had told him to leave for the provinces and not come back until the family's name was worth something again. Bert! Mateo did not turn his head. Who runs that stall? Bert set the mangoes down slower than he needed to. In 18 years, he had learned to read the boss's voice the way other men read weather. And this voice had something in it he had never heard before. Not anger, not suspicion, something closer to a held breath. Nuisance spring, boss. Quiet woman. Pays on time, keeps to herself. Don't think she's ever once asked you for anything. What's her name? Risa, Bert said. Risa Tane. Mateo did not answer. He was already crossing the row. She saw him coming before he reached her, and something passed over her face. Not fear, Bert noted, filing it away the way he filed everything. Something steadier than fear, something that looked almost like she had practiced for this exact moment for longer than made sense for a chance meeting. She wiped her hands on her apron and stood very straight, the way a person stands when they have decided a long time ago exactly what they will say if a particular day ever comes. Mateo, she said it plainly, no flourish, the way you'd greet a man you saw yesterday. Risa, he looked at her, and then, because he could not help it, at the boy. How old is he? 6 in March. The market did not stop the way it stops in stories. Carts kept moving. A fish vendor 3 rows over kept calling his prices. But everyone close enough to hear had gone very quiet, and Bert found himself standing closer than a porter had any business standing, his crate forgotten at his feet. 6 years, Mateo said. I know what you're counting. Risa did not look away from him. I'm not going to make you do the arithmetic out loud in front of half the market. Yes. He's yours. I never sent word because I never wanted you to come back out of duty. I wanted you to come back because you wanted to, or not come back at all, and let him be only mine, and that would have been all right too. I made my peace with that a long time ago. You never tried to find me. You left to save your father's name. I wasn't going to be the thing that pulled you back before you'd finished. She said it without bitterness. The way a person recites a fact they have turned over so many times it has lost its sharp edges. I heard, eventually, that you'd taken over everything, that you'd become someone people were afraid of. I didn't think a boy needed a father who was feared. I thought maybe it was kinder to let him grow up, not knowing what he was missing. Mateo's jaw worked once, and Bert, who had seen this man face down creditors twice his size without blinking, watched him struggle for words the way he had never seen him struggle for anything. What's his name? Emile. Risa's voice caught, just slightly, on the name, the first crack Bert had seen in her composure. I wanted to give him something of yours. Your father's middle name was Emilio. I don't know what I thought. I thought it might matter to him someday, even if it never mattered to anyone else. The boy had stopped stacking corn and was watching the two of them with the open, unguarded curiosity of a child who has not yet learned to be careful around grown men in good suits. He tilted his head at Mateo the exact way Mateo's own father used to tilt his, weighing a stranger, deciding what to make of him. Are you buying corn? Emil asked. It's the best in the market. Something in Mateo's face came apart, quietly, the way ice gives before it cracks all at once. He crouched, not bent at the waist the way a busy man humors a child, but all the way down, knees to the dust of the market floor, so that he was looking up at the boy instead of down. Bert had carried this man's crates for 18 years and had never once seen him kneel for anyone. I'd like to buy all of it, Mateo said, if your mother will let me. Emil looked past him at Risa, who gave the smallest nod, and the boy grinned and began scooping corn into a paper sack with both hands, narrating the whole transaction to himself in a happy, businesslike mutter that had nothing to do with the silent stretching taut between the two adults above his head. Mateo did not look away from the boy while he spoke to Risa. I'm not going to ask you to explain 6 years in the middle of a market row, but I'm not going to walk away from this stall and pretend I didn't see what I saw either. I'm not asking you to do anything. Risa's hands had gone still at her sides. I told you the truth because you deserved it the second you stood there long enough to ask. I'm not asking for money or a name or for you to feel obligated. We've managed. We'll keep managing. I know you have. Something rough had come into his voice, low enough that only Risa and Bert, hovering closer than was strictly his business, could hear it. I'm not offering to manage anything for you. I'm asking if you'll let me try to be something to him. Not because I owe it, because I want to know him. Whatever that looks like, slow, careful on whatever terms you set. I'm not the boy who left 6 years ago thinking he had all the time in the world. I know better now. Risa studied him for a long moment, the kind of look Bert imagined she'd practiced too, deciding whether 6 years had changed a man in front of her or only hardened him. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy something in her, because her shoulders eased, just slightly, for the first time since Mateo had crossed the row. He asked about his father sometimes, she said quietly. I never knew what to tell him that wasn't a lie and wasn't too painful for a 6-year-old to carry. If you mean it, really mean it, not for a season, not until it's inconvenient, then yes. He could use someone who means it. I mean it. Emil, oblivious to the weight of what had just been settled over his head, held the full paper sack of corn up toward Mateo with both arms. That's 12, he announced. You have to pay my mama, not me. I'm not allowed to take money yet. Mateo took the sack with the same careful reverence another man might use for something far more valuable, and paid Risa more than 12 ears of corn were worth, and did not move to correct it when she tried to hand the difference back. Will you come tomorrow? Emil asked, already losing interest in the transaction and more interested in the stranger himself. Mama, said the man who comes every morning, checks all the stalls. Are you that man? I am. Will you check mine? Mateo looked at the boy for a long moment, and something in his face settled into a kind of stillness Bert recognized now. Not the stillness of a man holding himself in check, but the stillness of a man who has just put something heavy down after carrying it a very long way. Every morning, Mateo said, for as long as you'll let me. He straightened, finally, dust on the knees of a suit that cost more than most vendors in that row would see in a month, and for once he did not seem to notice or care. He looked at Risa once more, not a question this time, something closer to gratitude, and then he turned and walked back through the rows the way he'd come, the sack of corn held against his chest like something he had no intention of setting down. Bert picked up his mangoes at last, hands not quite steady, and found he had to stand a moment before he trusted his legs to carry him on. 18 years he had watched that man walk those rows, watched vendors straighten their spines and lower their eyes, watched fear do all the work that fear does. He had never once, in 18 years, seen Mateo Vidal kneel in the dust for anyone. He thought about that the rest of the morning, turning it over the way he turned over a fair price. Would it meant that the most feared man in the market had gone down on his knees in front of a paper sack of corn and a boy who didn't know yet what his father's name was worth, and had not seemed, for even a moment, to think it cost him anything at all. The next morning, and every morning after, Mateo Vidal walked the rows the same way he always had, checking accounts, checking debts, checking the things a man in his position was meant to check. But he started, always, at the same stall, where a boy waited to tell him which corn was the best in the market, and a woman who had carried 6 years alone without once asking for help watched the two of them with something easing, finally, in her face. Bert never told anyone what he'd seen that Tuesday. Some things, he decided, a man keeps to himself, not because they're shameful, but because they're sacred, and the market had enough talk in it already without adding the one true thing he'd ever witnessed change a feared man's whole shape in under a minute. He only thought, most mornings now, watching Mateo crouch down by that little stall to hear about the day's corn before he checked anything else, that he had been wrong all those years to believe the boss's stillness was the most powerful thing about him. It was the kneeling that he never forgot,